Does your bass drum pedal feel slow and clumsy when you're trying to play fast? Or does it feel stiff when you're trying to play softly? Do you continue running into technical issues with your right foot, with your bass drum pedal, no matter how much you practice right foot technique? Have you been left wondering whether the problem is you or the pedal? Today, I want you to answer 5 questions that will help you zero in on your spring tension sweet spot so that you can get the most response out of your pedal, whether it's a DW9000 or an Iron Cobra or the budget pedal that came with your kit. We're gonna make this work. We're gonna make your pedal work. You can do this. Hey, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer, where we teach you the most important core drumming skills that help you make progress faster so that you can become the musical drummer you are meant to be, even if you just got 30 minutes a day. Even if your life is busy, you feel like you don't have a lot of natural ability, when you know the right things to practice, you get more results in less time, and that's what we are all about here. And hey, along those lines, I've got a free gift I want to give you. It's a free PDF e-guide in the description. It's called Know What to Practice. The 3-part daily practice routine for getting you maximum results and growth in just 30 minutes a day. This is literally the practice guide for people who are busy, ordinary people who want to grow at the drums and want to reach their goals and dreams of being musical and being able to just sit down and play any song. But you're busy, you don't have all day to work on this stuff because maybe you're not in high school anymore. This guide is for you. We've got all these specific coordination exercises that'll really push your limb independence. These are really cool. These have helped thousands of drummers. So you can join the ranks of your fellow non-glamorous drummers who have gotten great results out of this. We fix the we can. We work on building precise fluid time and navigation around the kit. And what's most important about this guide is it helps you stop wasting time because it shows you here are the most essential things to practice. And when you do that, you save time, you can get a lot done in 30 minutes a day, and so you truly can reach your goals. And so I want this for you. This is probably what you want to. If you're wanting to really reach your goals as a drummer, this guide's for you. So go download it. All right, on with today's lesson. Question number 1, how long or heavy is your beater? So as far as you can tell, do you have your beater pretty much extended all the way? So you've got as much beater length as possible, or do you have it shortened a little bit? And is your beater noticeably heavy, or do you feel like it's a pretty lightweight one? Generally those like cotton ball looking, that's not what they're made of, but like cotton ball looking beaters are a little bit lighter weight than one like mine where you've got the plastic side and the felt side. Generally these are a little bit heavier, so maybe you can use that reference to gauge. Also, your kick drum size is what's probably going to affect your beater length. If you've got a typical 22-inch kick drum, then you'll probably have your beater extended pretty much the full way. My kick drum is a 20-inch. And so I've got a little bit extra beater length to spare that I'm not using because I don't want it to land too far up. If you have a kick drum any smaller than this, you probably have one of those things that lets you raise the kick drum up so you mount the pedal underneath. You know what I'm talking about, where you can keep the beater there in the middle of the drum. So it's kind of that 20-inch kick drum size that might have you doing a shorter beater versus if you've got a 24-inch kick, you're probably doing maximum beater length. And there is a very distinct difference in feel when you've got all the way out versus slightly shorter. So all of that to say, the way that you've got your pedal adjusted in terms of that length is really going to affect the amount of spring tension that you want to have. If your pedal is longer, like if the beater is longer, then you're probably going to want more spring tension so that it responds quicker. Because remember that in the world of kick drum pedal, bass drum, all that, the spring is basically creating our rebound. When we hit a drum, we have rebound. But down here on the kick drum, there's not really any natural rebound without that spring. If you take your spring off your pedal and you play, then the beater just goes boom, and that's all there is to it. So the spring is your rebound. So if you feel like you need more rebound, you need a quicker response, the beater's not springing back quickly enough so you can play quickly, most likely you need more spring tension. And if you have a longer beater or you're playing a big kick drum that requires you to extend the beater all the way, you're probably going to need that extra spring tension, especially if you're playing loudly. However, if it's a shorter beater, maybe a smaller kick drum, or you just like the feel of a shorter beater, you can get by with less spring tension because too much spring tension actually makes the pedal feel a little bit slow and stiff when the beater is shorter. Likewise, when we're talking weight, because these two things, weight and beater length, are very related because a longer beater feels heavier, shorter beater feels lighter. With a lighter feeling pedal, you probably don't want as much spring tension versus when it's a heavier feeling pedal, whether the beater's heavier or it's just longer, you probably want a little bit more. So that's the first basic, very basic question to ask. Is my beater pretty long? Is it kind of short? How heavy is it? Some pedals even have little weights that you can slide up and down the shaft. You can even make your own by taping coins, taping nuts, washers, whatever hardware to the shaft, to the beater shaft right here below the actual beater head. You can tape things to there to adjust the weight if you feel like you want a heavier pedal. So that's always something you can play around with too. And so I would definitely recommend increasing spring tension a little bit if you've got that long beater, and maybe try decreasing it if it's shorter. But of course, you'll have to find your sweet spot, but that's what these other 4 questions are for also. Help guide you down this path so that once we get through all of this, you'll have a pretty good idea which way you need to go. Question number 2. This is really interesting to me. I've always found this interesting, and when I share it with students, they always find it pretty interesting too, because every pedal's different. If you take your beater with your finger like this, and you let it swing toward the drum like this, what tempo is it bobbing at? We'll just call this the beater bob. What tempo is your beater bob? Or your pedal's natural tempo? We could say that every pedal has a natural tempo. What is yours? So if you pull your beater back all the way, let go, boom, 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 boom. Mine is like 1/8 notes at 100, pretty much right there. I don't know exactly what it is. It's roughly in that ballpark. Yours might be similar, it might be a little faster, it might be a little slower. That's okay, because every pedal's different, and the factors we just talked about in question number 1, those directly affect that too. A heavier beater is going to go a little slower, a longer beater is going to go slower, versus lighter and shorter will go faster. And just the mechanics of your pedal, and whether it's a higher end pedal or a lower end pedal, or how it's built, these are all mechanical details that are going to affect that tempo. But see what yours is. Something that I do notice a lot of times when working with one-on-one students, if I have them do this and their pedal is just kind of slow or stiff, or there's not much range to this, like when they do this, the beater should be going like a pretty full range of motion, gradually decreasing. But if that range isn't much, like if you do this and your beater just goes boom, 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 and then it just stops quickly, it's very possible you just need to oil up your pedal. So I'd recommend finding some dry lubricant. You can get it at Home Depot, Walmart, whatever. It's in a spray can like WD-40, but it sprays on, it's basically a spray-on powder that is great for lubricating moving parts on a pedal. So check that out for sure. That could be your solution if you're not getting much bounce here. But if you're getting a very quick bounce, like it's going really quick, I'd recommend extending your beater a little bit, or if this is if it's really slow, then either shorten your beater a little bit or increase the spring tension. So remember that if it's bobbing slowly, that might mean that the spring tension is just a little too loose. And so you can quicken that by tightening the spring tension. Or if you do this and it's just super quick and then it just dies out really fast, I would say either it means you need to oil up your pedal because it's stiff, or you actually have too much spring tension. So loosening the spring tension will allow the beater to travel a little bit more and move a little more before it stops. Hopefully that makes sense. Hope it makes sense how all these things are related. And so it's really just common sense when you look at it and you think about the mechanics of your pedal and how beater length and weight and spring tension, these things all affect each other. And so you change one of those factors and potentially you've got to think about the other two also. Question number 3, and this is an interesting one because sometimes it's easy to skip over this. We don't really think about this. How easily can you play softly? So that might mean just sitting here and playing something like, doesn't matter what you're playing, just play some notes on the kick very softly. How does that feel when you're playing softly? Does it feel like the beater wants to stop before hitting the head? Because I've noticed this on some pedals before where I start playing softly and the beater, because I'm trying to play softly, I'm not putting a lot of force into it, and there's so much spring tension that the beater barely even wants to make it to the head. It's stopping right here, and so it's very hard to play cleanly and precisely slowly. You might notice that with your pedal, and I've noticed especially with lower end pedals that this tends to be the case, where because it's a lighter feeling pedal that just doesn't have quite as much smoothness and mobility as maybe a higher end pedal, sometimes when you play slowly, it's hard to get the beater to comfortably live right up here, close to the head, but it feels just fine when you're playing loudly. But when you go slow, it's like, I don't know. So sometimes with a potentially lower end, a lighter feeling pedal, if you're running into this where you can't play lightly very well, you can't do this very consistently, or it's just very difficult and you feel like you're having to put a lot of foot weight into this and it's getting all stiff, which is no good, that might just mean you actually need to loosen your spring tension a little bit. So for that particular pedal, if this is what you're running into, you may want to loosen the spring tension. I noticed this specifically with a lower end pedal I have. Exact same story where I sat down and started playing lightly. It felt weird. And in order to make it feel like this pedal, which is a DW9000, I actually had to decrease the spring tension. So I can get by with a tighter spring tension on this pedal, but not so with the cheaper pedal. So that's something you might notice too, especially if you happen to have two pedals at your disposal. This is even more interesting because you can compare the two and notice how more spring tension here does not feel the same as more spring tension here, because every pedal is a little bit different. But if you're running into this where you have a hard time playing quietly, then try to just lessen that spring tension a little bit. Or again, keeping in mind these different factors, or increase the weight of your beater by taping something onto the shaft here, or extend the length of your beater a little bit so you have some more throw. So you have some weight, some physics helping you out here against that tighter spring tension. So remember, you can mess with any of these three factors, and that's how you find your sweet spot. It makes me think of coffee. I'm really into making good coffee. I love making good coffee. And there's all these different factors that go into the coffee, whether it's grind size, so you can grind fine or coarse. There's water temperature, and there's brew time. And there's probably even more than that. I'm not an expert. I'm a hobby coffee maker. But what's interesting is you can play around with any of these factors, and you can do a coarser grind and brew the coffee longer, which gives you a similar result to a finer grind and brewing the coffee for a shorter amount of time. But the taste is totally different. And so it's hard to say which is better, but either way works. And so it's totally the same with this. If you happen to be a fellow coffee fan, drop a comment and let me know. We can talk. But it's very similar with this because you've got beater length, beater weight, and spring tension, and all these things are related, and you can change their ratios. And it's kind of like the equation always equals the same amount, if that makes sense. So now question number 4, the vice versa, flip side of this. How does the pedal feel when you're playing loudly? So if you just sit here and you just play loudly, whatever it is, whether you're playing a song, groove, just playing randomness like that, how does the pedal feel when playing loudly? Does it feel stiff and slow and lagging, like it just doesn't have a quick response and you feel like it's just the pedal isn't keeping up with your foot? Because if that's how it feels, that might mean you don't have enough spring tension, or it might mean the beater is too long, or it might mean the beater is too heavy. Remember, you can mess with any of those three factors, and so as far as spring tension goes, I would recommend tightening the spring tension a little bit. If playing loudly you feel like you're not getting as quick of a response. What's cool is that you can go back and forth between these last two questions, number 3 and number 4. How does the soft playing feel? How does the loud playing feel? Until you find that sweet spot, because you don't want to go so tight that you optimize for the loud playing and sacrifice the ability to play softly. And you don't want to get so loose with the spring tension that you can play soft well, but then when you get loud, it just lags and doesn't feel good. And so you have to go back and forth with these two, go back and forth between questions 3 and 4 and test out the soft, the loud, the medium, anywhere in between, so that you can eventually begin to find your sweet spot. And depending on what style of music you're playing, like if you're playing in a punk rock band and you've got to play loud and fast all the time, go with tighter spring tension, definitely. But if you're playing softly all the time, you're playing in like coffee shops, like small rooms, you're doing those kinds of gigs, then you might want to have less spring tension because you don't need that crazy fast, loud response. You can get by with the softer, with the less spring tension kind of feel. And you might even find, like, if you're doing quieter gigs, you're doing louder gigs, and you have a couple of pedals at your disposal, you might find that one pedal feels good for the soft playing, one pedal feels good for the loud playing, and maybe you adjust them accordingly. And so that can be a great thing too. All right, before we get into point number 5, we've also got a bonus point I'm going to tell you about after we get through with number 5, which is very important to keep in mind and kind of is something that kind of overshadows everything we've talked about today. So I definitely don't want you to miss that. So we're going to hit that bonus point in a minute. But first, number 5. Question number 5. Are you playing heel up or heel down? And where on the foot plate are you placing your foot? Because this is definitely a big factor. We don't want to neglect, okay, if we're playing right here, more spring tension's fine because my foot is pretty far up the pedal and I've got a lot of weight going into it. If we're playing back here, well, maybe we want a little bit less spring tension. Or if we're playing heel down right here, okay, a good bit of spring tension would be okay. But heel down right here, we might want a little bit less. And so all these different things are definitely factors. And so you want to think about, all right, how am I playing? How do I play when I'm playing loudly versus when I'm playing softly? And so make sure you're weighing these things into your decision making here as you're adjusting the pedal. I will always recommend to you to bounce the beater and to aid in doing that, not have your foot too far up. So if that means you've got your foot here, and because you're used to being up here, maybe now you need to loosen the spring tension a little bit, that's okay. If you need to loosen the spring tension so you can feel okay with moving from up here, where you've got more torque, I guess you could say, to down here where there's less torque, that's fine. If you need to loosen the spring tension, that's okay. And even if you're working on moving your foot even further back, do what you got to do here to make it feel good, because what's cool is that you can actually play quicker and more loudly and more consistently because you're using more the physics of the pedal when your foot's further back here. The further up here your foot is, the more in the way you are of yourself. Just like with a drumstick, if you are gripping way up here on the stick, this doesn't work. You want to be far enough back that this makes sense and you can get natural rebound and let the physics do the work. So the equivalent on our bass drum pedal is we want to let physics do the work. So don't be too far up the pedal. Don't be too far up the foot plate. Find your sweet spot. For me, I'm a size 11.5. I like to have my heel on the heel plate right here, which puts my toes about right here. This is my sweet spot, and I'd be okay even going further back down here where I'm starting to get my heel onto the floor potentially. I've had students with feet bigger than mine where that's what they're doing. Really, they've got their heel back here on the back edge, and then that puts their toe like right up here. So you do what feels comfortable to you, but I want to strongly encourage you to play around with that, coming a little further back, because that's going to give you a better response. Sit further back if you need to, sit higher up if you need to, whatever you got to do to make this work. Think about all the factors that go into this. And if your ankle's hurting, your shin's hurting, probably means you need to sit further back. I went through that in my playing where I had to sit further back in order to move my foot from here to here, which of course is common sense. It makes sense that that would be the case, that I would need to sit further back in order to pull my heel further back. But it's amazing how we don't think of these things sometimes because we just don't. Sometimes we need somebody to tell us and notice these things and make us go, oh, okay, that was simple. All I needed to do was slide back 2 inches and now it feels a lot better. So definitely try that, play around with that. And as you fine tune your foot position so that you're bouncing the beater, so you've got this free kind of motion happening from the beater so that you're able to play in time better and you can play more quickly and loudly and softly. All these things get easier when you allow the pedal to move a little more on its own, just like with the sticks. And so as you're fine tuning that and as you're working your foot technique, which I'll link a video below about that if you want to dig more into foot technique, as you're working on that, continue to fine-tune your spring tension and continue to revisit the previous questions, especially 3 and 4, about how does the soft playing feel, how does the loud playing feel, and continue to adjust your beater and play around with the weight and the length, kind of letting this final point be a big umbrella that arches over everything. Now, I mentioned the bonus point, which is also one of those overarching things that you want to keep in mind long-term as you're working on all of this, and it's this. Ultimately, you want more spring tension as you build up more foot, ankle, and leg strength over time. Just not so much that you can't play quietly. What you'll find is that the more strength you build up, the more spring tension you can withstand, and the more that spring tension is actually going to help you out. If you're a total beginner and you don't have any leg, foot, ankle strength here, you're probably going to want less spring tension because it's going to feel too tight. It's going to feel like it's inhibiting you, especially when playing loudly. Like, you're not going to be able to play loudly well if you've got a ton of spring tension because your leg isn't strong enough yet, your ankle's not strong enough yet. But as you build up that strength over time, that loud playing becomes easier and more consistent because physics can take over when you've got the tighter spring tension. So that's what you want to be patient with, and know that, okay, if you're new to this, at first you might want less spring tension, but make it a goal to gradually tighten up a little bit over time. Because eventually, when you've got the strength here and you can play whatever you want to play, the spring tension is your rebound. That's going to help you out. It's like tuning up a head tighter where suddenly you've got more response and more rebound and everything gets easier. So keeping that in mind, over time, be working on building up the strength. I'll link a video for more detail on how to do that, where we talk about foot technique and strength building and all of that good stuff. As you're doing that, continue revisiting each of these questions so you can continue to fine-tune your pedal adjustment, beater weight, length, and spring tension too. And a couple other last things before we go. Make sure that you've got a good angle here on your beater. Make sure that your resting beater angle is not up here. I've seen this in students' pedals before, and that's not good. You can't play loud and fast when you've only got this amount of motion possible. You need to have at least a 45-degree angle, if not a little bit further back. The beater's not going to slam into your foot if you keep your foot in contact with the foot plate. In order for the beater to hit my foot, this is how high up the foot plate has to come. So if I keep my foot in contact with it, that will keep that from happening. And so again, it's the common sense of it that sometimes we don't think through, but when you actually think through, all right, here's what the pedal's doing, it all makes sense. All right, you are armed with all the knowledge you need to find your spring tension sweet spot. So attack this with some patience and know that as you develop your foot technique, these things are always going to be a work in progress. But go through, answer these questions, take action, get your pedal optimized, and let me know how it goes. And hey, before you go, download my free guide in the description, Know What to Practice, your 3-part daily practice routine for getting maximum results when you've just got 30 minutes a day. Going to help you eliminate your weak hand and build the ability to fluidly navigate around the kit and nail fills. Going to give you the ability to build 4-way coordination because we've got all these cool coordination exercises, and so you'll have true 4-way freedom around the kit so you can sit down and play whatever you want to play and actually feel comfort behind the kit, which is awesome. And all in all, it's going to help you stop wasting time and really make progress and get serious results if you are a busy person and you don't have all day to practice, because this shows you the most essential things to focus in on so that you can get a lot done in short practice sessions so you can reach your goals and your dreams on the drums. This is what I want for you, and I hope that this guide really helps you get there. So be sure to grab that before you go. Hey, as always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out today. I hope this lesson is super beneficial to you and you really get some powerful results from this as you take this and you apply these techniques to your pedal. I hope you have a great week. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. I'll see you on the next lesson. Stay non-glamorous.